Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Eloise Schottler. I'm your storyteller host. Earlier this week, I was at Arlington National Cemetery and I stopped in the Women's Memorial. It has a longer name than that. It's for the women who have served in the American military. It's right at the major front gates, inside the front gates. It's a beautiful building, and what they do is they collect information, they have exhibits, and they record women who have served in the service of America in the military. When I went in there, I looked at a few of the exhibits, and then I went in to see if my aunt was registered. I knew she was, but I just wanted to see it pop up on the screen. And there she was, Katherine Brown, née Diggle. Katherine, my Aunt Katherine, was the fifth of my father's sibship. He was the fourth, and she was the fifth. And she was the last of the Diggle girls to marry, so she was around when all of us, the first group of cousins, were born in the late 30s and 40s. She was living at home. She took pictures of all of us. She was always there, and she was the family historian. She collected pictures of the old ones and added pictures of the new ones into that, and she had the stories. Well, when she reached the age of about 85, one of the most precious things that she had, that she valued as much as any of her collections, was her WWAC uniform from World War II. The last time I saw her, she brought it out and showed it to me, held it up, put the cap on, and she was so proud. She drove a car with a DAV, Disabled American Veteran, a DAV tag on the back. It was sitting outside her apartment that night. And one of the other things that Koki, we called her Koki, used so much of her time for was shifting through her papers, sorting her photographs. I never knew when something would come in the mail that would be a picture of me that she had taken with her brownie box camera. Families are really lucky when they have someone like that that's holding their history for them. Well, when I started genealogy and then later storytelling, I always went to her when I was looking for something. And one afternoon, I was just getting ready to put together a program of ghost stories, and since my family is haunted, she told me that, and she told me the stories. I like to tell ghost stories. And I needed to refresh and also to see if she had something new up her sleeve. Well, that day when I called her, she was not interested in talking about haunts. Our haunts or anybody else's haunts. She said, I've been going through my papers and I found something and I think I'll tell you about it. And I was smart enough that day that I picked up a pencil and wrote it down. Eloise, I have been going through my papers, looking through all the photographs and the papers, and you know, the other thing that I do when I'm going through the papers is I read the paper, the Charlotte Observer. I read it every day, and I always start with the obituaries because that's where I find all of my people these days. You'll know about that sometime. And there she was. I don't know why I read it particularly on that day, but I did. I knew that I just had to. And there she was, Mildred Kenny. I don't remember what her married name is, but there she was in the obituaries. She had lived out in California, and she had died out there, and they were bringing her back to Charlotte to be buried on the family plot in Elmwood Cemetery. They were going to have a service a burial service. I knew I was going to go. But it brought back so many memories because I met her the day that we went to war together. Now, I don't know if I've told you about that. I probably have, but I'll tell you again. It was in 1943. I had been working as medical secretary for the 38th EVAC Hospital out at Morris Field, an air base outside Charlotte, and they had shipped out. All my doctors were gone. They had all shipped out. And I didn't want to get a job with another doctor in Charlotte, but that's what I did, medical secretarying. And I went down to the post office one day to mail a letter, you know, the big post office down on Trade Street, and I was just looking around and studying about what my future would be, and I noticed a poster up on the wall, a big picture of Uncle Sam pointing his finger right at me. Uncle Sam wants you. Got my attention right away. I looked at all the papers laying around on the shelf. It was about this new thing, the WWACs, the Women's Army Corps, that had started up. I read everything and I studied on it and I thought about it, and the sign said downstairs with an arrow pointing down. Now, you remember how those steps were? 6 steps down, then a landing, it turns, and you go 6 more steps. Well, I went 6 steps, I turned at the landing, and when I started down again, all I saw through the glass door down at the bottom were men's feet standing in line. I didn't see a single pair of high heels down there. Scared me so bad I ran back upstairs. And I thought about it some more. I even went over and bought a candy bar from Blind Jerry's stand. It's a Hershey bar. Ate my Hershey bar and thought, and then I thought, I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. And I went back downstairs and I signed up. I did. Now, that didn't mean that I was absolutely in, because the next step was you had to take the bus and go to Fort Bragg and get a physical and figure out all the papers and take some tests and stuff. And that's where I'm coming to. The day that I went down on the bus was the same day that Mildred was going down on the bus, because we had signed up in the same week. And we rode down there together. We took our physicals, and later, back in Charlotte, each one of us got a letter saying we were in. Not only that, we got train tickets that we were going to Des Moines, Iowa on the same day, the same time we would go together to be inducted and trained as a WWAC officer. Well, I'll tell you, I was so dressed up. I had on a little black suit, my gloves, a little teeny hat with a veil that hit me right at the nose. And when we were there with our families getting on the train, a reporter, a photographer, and a reporter came from the Charlotte News, took our picture for the paper, and there it was, 2 Charlotte girls going off to war. You should have seen us. We were just darling. We were darling. Well, after we got to Des Moines, we were going to go into different things, and we sort of split up. And to tell you the honest truth, I lost track of Mildred. I did. I lost track of her. And then she got married. She moved to California, as I told you. And here's my first reconnecting with her. Her obituary telling me she's being buried out at Elmwood Cemetery. Well, that morning, I got up. I felt terrible. I felt so puny that morning, you just can't believe it. But I was determined, and I put on my yellow slacks and a little flowered shirt. I looked very spiffy, and I drove out. I thought maybe people would notice that I was driving with my DAV tag. And I parked nearby Eloise. She was buried near Mama. She was going to be buried on the Kinney plot, and it wasn't too far, maybe just half a block from where Mama's buried. And when I got there, there were just a few chairs, a few younger people, And I didn't want to intrude, you know, I didn't want to intrude. So I sat on a tombstone nearby so I could hear everything. It's a burial service. Well, let me tell you, her casket was covered with an American flag. There were a couple of soldiers there. And when time came, they played taps on a disc player. They did. It was the military honors for Mildred. Afterwards, I went over, those are grandchildren, and I introduced myself and told them how we had met when we signed up for the WWACs and we went off to war together. They told me that she had kept all of her military uniform and WWAC stuff just like I did, and how important it was to her. Well, they patted me when I told them how we met and knew each other. They were starstruck. And they wanted me to come home with them, but you know, it was too hot. July in Charlotte is just awful. So I didn't do that. And as I thought about it, you know, I was feeling puny, and here we were. Isn't that strange? That we were reconnecting. Mildred at her funeral and me almost at mine. No, now stop that. I promise I will hang around as long as I can, Eloise. Well, she did hang around for a time, but it wasn't long enough. It never is it? And when she died, months later, I found myself standing beside her casket to tell a story about her. And when I reached down to put my hand on the casket, I touched rough cloth, an American flag. And at her burial, there were soldiers there, and there was a bugler with his trumpet, and he played taps for Koki. Military honors. And I could think of her. We were so darling. And weren't they all? Thank you very much.